All right.
Okay. I would now like to call the May 21st, 2025 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Could we please start with the roll call?
Yes, Michelle Roth.
Here.
Mary Lynn.
Here.
Corkett Oneron is not able to join us today. Robert Davidson.
Here.
Ralph Grosswald.
No.
Daniel Leonard.
Here.
Ethan Augreen.
Here.
Lisa Knobloch.
Here.
Susan Bartlett.
Here.
Heather McIntyre is here, and Councilmember Popkin.
Here.
All right, Chair, you have a quorum.
Fantastic. Well, I'll start off with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the First Peoples have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. And our inclusion statement, the Sustainability Advisory Board embraces diverse perspectives from its members and the public. To create an inclusive space where everyone feels welcome to share their opinion, the board asks that all attendees listen and speak with respect and avoid attacks on individuals or specific group identities. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any corrections needed or changes that need to be amended?
Yes, I noticed 2 typos in the spelling of your name, Robert. It said Robertson instead of Davidson.
Good catch. Where were those? Or I guess we could just do a search for Robertson.
We'll get him. Sorry about that, right?
Yeah, Chair Robertson. No worries. It's happened my whole life. Councilmember Popkin?
Yes, there was a typo on page 6, substantive. I pulled that up. When we were referring to what Mayor Peck had previously motioned for, it was not at a city council meeting, it was at a PRPA board meeting, I believe. Susan, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that was what the reference was. This is at the bottom of page 6. No, not the bottom.
I think you're correct, Matthew.
Thanks, Susan.
Any other suggested changes? Do I hear a motion for approving the minutes with those modifications?
Motion to approve with modifications.
Thank you, Daniel. Any second?
Second that.
All those in favor? All those opposed?
I'm abstaining. I totally forgot to look.
Perfect. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I was like, your camera is very much on your face, so I
Yeah,
couldn't tell
so-
if your hand like went up or not. So perfect. Okay. Thank you. Well, the motion carries there. Are there any agenda revisions or anything we need to bring up there?
Nope.
Okay. Well, then on to general business, which is the only item we have is to review the fueling station summary and draft statement. So, Lisa.
Right. Thank you all. I'm gonna just put together a quick, whoops, sorry, I'm working off of one screen today, so feel free to jump in and just holler at me because once I pull this up, I am not going to be able to see you all. There we go. All right. Oh, I can see you. That's great. Can everyone see that presentation?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. This will be pretty quick, I think. This is just a reminder of the motion for reference. This is the timeline that we went through. So today, I'm just presenting to you all. I did take y'all's conversation and discussion and circulated it to some folks internally to make sure what we were putting forward made sense. We weren't missing anything or weren't saying anything that wouldn't make sense to pass on to city council. Got some feedback that I included into the recommendations, and then I drafted it's not quite a statement, it's more an outline to make sure that I covered things. And what I was hoping today is that we could get one or two of you to volunteer to draft a final statement between now and the next meeting. It's just a statement. It doesn't need to be super substantive, or not substantive, but super long. In June, we'll finalize that statement and then provide a report to City Council. What I ended up doing after your feedback last time, I took all of that and I kind of sat with it and was organizing things, kind of thinking about what you all brought up with regards to community engagement and land use. And we had talked about having kind of a first tier and second tier recommendation in terms of a second phase being that community engagement with the Envision Longmont update. But when I was laying it out, it actually naturally kind of fell into, at least in the way my brain organizes things, into these 4 buckets. And I ended up just including that as a consideration in the land use bucket. And so I'll walk through that with you. If you all don't think that that approach makes sense, we can definitely pull it back out. But I'll run through everything and then you all can tell me whether or not I missed anything and if you think that makes sense. So the biggest bucket was really that consideration around environmental impacts. And so I took the recommendations that you all had put together around ensuring that there's funding available for remediation, considering different separation requirements, stormwater mitigation measures similar to air quality. That was actually some feedback from our environmental affairs manager to make sure that we're looking at that similarly. And then mitigating long-term environmental impacts for water resources. And there was a couple of additional kind of details that were added into that from our environmental affairs manager. Public health and safety considerations. So we talked about air quality control mechanisms and separation requirements for protected facilities in between fueling stations. This one came up from someone from fire safety that does a lot of work around fueling stations and actually recommended the potential for looking at allowing above ground storage. So right now we only allow and then regulate below ground storage. And she brought up the point that actually, if we could allow above ground or at least consider above ground storage with certain size tanks, that would make the redevelopment of fueling station sites easier in the future. If we made sure that we took into account certain environmental protections, we would want to research that quite a bit more if City Council did want to go that route, but I did add that in. And then current and future land use. So considering tiered requirements based on size of gas stations. And then this is where I put evaluate the need, siting and restrictions of fueling stations more comprehensively through community engagement. And sorry, my robust community engagement with the next Envision Longmont update. So that's where that landed. And then making sure that to continue to encourage require electric vehicle supply equipment and avoiding inadvertent restrictions on EV charging. So those are the 4, before we move on to the next part, those are the 4 buckets that I cut things into. Does that categorization make sense to folks, or do you want me to continue to run through and then we can circle back if that format makes sense?
It makes sense. Can we make comments now about the things that the content that you've presented here, or do you want to wait for that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about proximity of electric vehicle charging and fuel charging. Have there been any concerns about the safety of having them in proximity to one another? Because of the potential fire danger from electric fueling. I know that some of the fires that have happened with EV vehicles happened during the fueling process.
That has not come up that I am aware of, but we can add that as a safety consideration if that's, I mean, again, these are only considerations that would need to be researched further, so.
Right. I think it's something that needs to be researched further.
I'm just looking for a pen. Do other folks have?
I just want to build on Board Member Lynn's comment there. If we're looking into fire safety, we should look into that across the board. And we should be thinking about that, particularly when we're discussing with any infrastructure here and how the fire code would respond to that. I don't think we should separate out any type of particular infrastructure here because Board Member Lynn spoke about some safety concerns. We're also dealing with flammable substances in the other one. So let's make sure we're treating fire risk consistently across the board. Thank you.
And I did have, like I said, I did have one of the fire safety folks review this, and she did not flag that, but that's not something I have seen. Will say that fire safety and fire code is a segment that is very heavily regulated. Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
And does that also include, Mary raising this point, does that also include above ground storage tanks? Is there
Yeah,
any?
that also seems sketchy to me.
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing. And again, we're just giving an overview here, and I assume this will be very carefully delved in, but I have a lot of questions and concerns about that. I certainly see the value of it in terms of reclaiming a site down the road. It's much easier, but it would concern me about safety risks, fire risks. I know they're going to be addressing that. Obviously, the experts will, but considering Mary's point about electric charging, is that an issue? Does there need to be any consideration of separation of those two entities?
Yeah.
I think Councilmember Popkin brings up a good point that any of this, were it to move forward, would be evaluated against a number of different existing health and safety codes. So the fire code being one of them, we would not allow those to be in proximity if that was a known hazard. So we can build something into the statement that says we recognize that these are very high level considerations that would need to be researched and assessed further for viability, etc. Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, that thank you, Lisa. That because I see the safety concerns, but also recognize those are someone else's purview to ensure. But I think to this question, the environmental concern is, and our sustainability concern is use of the EV chargers. And so I think it's important to iterate in here if we are tying EV infrastructure to the development of new gas stations, to make sure that those EV chargers are built in a place where they will be most utilized. And that is not going to be at a gas station, unless they're putting in superchargers. And so I think that's the consideration, is making sure if we are tying those two together, let's make sure the EV chargers are put in the place of highest use, highest demand.
Thank you.
That's a good point. I don't see why they have to be together.
Yeah. Why build it there when you could build it at a park, at a grocery store, at a hotel, at these places where people need to charge their vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah, we did not recommend that they be required to be. It was just to say to continue to encourage or require EV charging and to not inadvertently discourage or eliminate that possibility in our regulation of fueling stations. So, Ethan.
Lisa, were you able to do any geospatial analysis on where gas stations are currently located?
No, I put that under current and future land use because we're not at that level for this. I mean, we're just providing a statement to city council at this point in time. So I said, evaluate the need, citing and restrictions of fueling stations more comprehensively and through community engagement with the next Envision Longmont update. Or if city council directs us to move any further with fueling stations, then that's the point in which we would really bring that in. I don't think that this stage in the process would warrant that.
Well, as for future consideration, I'm also wondering if there are any properties that are zoned and approved for gas stations, but where the gas station has not been built yet. I think there's at least one that I've seen.
That I don't know.
Are there any in the active development log? I haven't looked in a little while.
I don't know that either.
Yes, there are.
Again, I do want to, this is just a position statement on development of fueling stations, so I don't think we need to get to that level of detail at this point in time.
No, I'll also note that in the development process, typically, depending on the stage that projects are at, typically projects follow the laws that are and the code requirements that are currently in place when they apply, out of fairness to all applicants who apply for that process. Again, to Lisa's point, we're looking at what the position statement would be here from the board's perspective to consider if there would be policy changes or code changes made as a result of this.
I'm going to keep moving through this and then we can circle back if there's any other questions for folks. So this was the draft outline I put together for y'all's statement. Again, I'm hoping that one of you would, or two, up to two, would be willing to volunteer to draft something for the next meeting. But just putting in a background in terms of the overview of the proposal, I'm happy to include the summary of research that we did, the things that you all discussed at the April and May meetings, and, you know, kind of detail the approach that you decided on. The proposal would be the considerations from the previous slides and any amendments that you all wanted to make to those. And then just, I mean, this is just to me a general proposal, is making sure that any recommendations are in alignment with sustainable, or any future regulations would be in alignment with sustainability and climate goals. And then providing a conclusion, which is where I think you all can offer additional support if council wants to move forward, where you can continue to weigh in on that process. And then just your appreciation for them, you know, handing this opportunity to you all to provide that input. Do folks have feedback on that format? Again, it's just a position statement, so it doesn't require much more detail, I would say, beyond this.
No, I like that. I think it's a good structure.
Thoughts or comments? Anyone want to volunteer to take it and draft it into something ready for the next meeting?
I get paid to write things. I can write this.
Thanks, Daniel. We're not going to pay you, but
Oh, in that case, just,
I know.
that's what. Yeah, yeah. Happy to draft it in.
We'll pay you with our endless appreciation.
Just give it back to the earth. That's all.
Great. Thanks so much, Daniel. Does anyone want to support Daniel in that, or do we want to hand it off to Daniel and trust him to work his magic?
Can I, if I was with the process with that, if I wanted to share a draft with folks for feedback, that would have to be done at a meeting, correct? People could not send me feedback on a draft because that would turn into a serial meeting.
I think we can send feedback individually. You can email us one-on-one and we can send feedback that way, if I'm not mistaken.
What we could do, and Heather, I'm going to lean on Heather because she's better at these protocol pieces than I am. I think you could send it to Heather and I, and we could send it out to the board, and they could, and everyone could send feedback to us to then share with you. Heather, is that? So
Yeah,
you're
so
communicating directly with Heather in that regard?
yeah, if Daniel sent his draft to me and you, Lisa, then we can forward it to the board. If the board members had feedback to share, they could forward that individually back to you and I, and then we can compile it and send it all to Daniel.
Great. Easy.
All right. All right, Daniel, I'll make sure you all have this, and then you and I can coordinate a timeline just so we can make sure we're, you know, and if it needs to bump past June, I think that's okay too. You know,
Get on this.
it's not any significant deadline that we're working under. We just want to get it you know, back as soon as we can to city council. So you and I can work backwards from the June date and make sure to get something out to you all.
I was gonna check for content of the letter. I was looking back at my notes, and one thing we had talked about was decoupling EV charging and gasoline charging from
Oh, the definition.
yeah, a shared
Stations?
definition of fueling stations. Um,
Yeah, I
particularly,
did.
particularly when it comes to land use restrictions. And so those use restrictions that apply to gasoline fueling stations generally don't apply to electric stations and vice versa.
Yeah, when I talked to our planning director about that, his thought was the definition was fine to leave it as is, as long as we made sure to build in some language somewhere about, again, that piece of not inadvertently precluding EV charging in our regulating. So you could say like this applies to fueling stations when there's gasoline, but not, you know, when it's electric vehicle charging. Or if we wanted to, we could separate it out. He was kind of like, it doesn't really matter as long as you're aware that you're not having that adverse impact on EV charging. So. But you could build that in too if you wanted to make that more clear if it wasn't.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, other thoughts too. Yeah, if it's not something folks are concerned about.
Any other thoughts or comments? Otherwise, we can wrap this piece up.
Okay, well, thank you, Lisa.
Awesome.
We don't have any members of the public here, so we're going to bypass the public invited to be heard segment in the agenda. We don't have any other business on the agenda. Are there any items from staff that we need to bring up that weren't already listed? Assume not.
I don't think so.
Okay. Items from the board. Does anyone on the board have anything that they would like to bring forth for us to discuss today? Ralph, did I see a hand raised there?
I think a number of the members of our board attended the Front Range Sustainability Council regional meeting that took place last week. It was a terrific event. I especially want to acknowledge and thank Lisa for a terrific presentation. You know, I'm the one who suggested to the Front Range Sustainability Council that we do this because of the great work we're doing in the city of Longmont, and this inspired several other communities who were interested and immediately requested her slides. And I think that the work that's being done here is going to impact other communities along the Front Range. And I just wanted to thank Lisa for a terrific job. And it was for the sustainability, Front Range Sustainability Council that's looking to find its legs, seeing that the city of Longmont is going to be helping other communities move their sustainability programs forward. It was a very good event. So thank you again, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ralph. Thank you all for coming. It was really fun to host folks, and definitely word's gotten around because I was at a meeting yesterday with Front Range Sustainability folks, and a handful of people mentioned it to me. So that's great.
And there will be we will be having a business meeting for people who are members of that council, and I will report on anything that is relevant for us at our next meeting.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ralph.
Thanks, Ralph.
I was wondering with regard to the business meeting and knowing that you are cycling off the board, if we should prioritize one of us also being at that business meeting to start thinking of maybe the handoff. Because you mentioned last meeting about wanting to identify a new representative. And so wondering if a little overlap at the business meeting might be helpful.
I nominate Daniel as the next representative.
The bylaws for that council, which actually have never been approved by the body, this body has been a little loose on protocol, does state, although they haven't been approved, that you simply have to be a member of a sustainability or environmental board for city. So Daniel, you would qualify. I can certainly make sure if you're not on the list that you are, and it's voluntary. So, everybody is anxious to have as much participation as possible to move this forward. And it's a good group of people. So if you would like to participate in that, I'll make sure you're on the list and attend the meeting. And, as it stands, it may be that I will be off of that committee if I'm no longer on our local board.
Well, I want to make a
I
point.
think from our perspective, we as a board did vote to appoint Ralph to that Sustainability Council. So from this board's perspective, it would probably be good to make a vote to move that or change that moving forward. So if we have a second for Mary's motion.
Okay, I want to, yeah, if someone seconds, I have discussion.
Well, I was to say, but before that, I was going to ask, is it prudent to wait until we have the new members of the board and see if any of them are particularly passionate or have an ability to contribute in a way that we hadn't considered? I just want to throw that perspective out there.
Well, but they can't really represent the board because they don't really have their feet wet yet, Robert.
But that's fair as well.
I would agree with Mary on that. And certainly I want to stay in this position until after the business meeting, since I'm on the steering committee of that group, and we'll hang out until, and I would love for Daniel to pick up and move forward with it.
I don't have a particular opinion on this. I just wanted to offer another option here, which could be to nominate someone for a year and kind of make it a time-bound process so that you could then reevaluate that if another board member of the new members was interested. You don't have to do that. I'm just
Fair.
offering that as a way to kind of allow for kind of flexibility here based on different people's interests.
Well, because we're in discussion without a second, I'm going to just throw this in anyway. Ralph, there's other people on that board that used to sit on sustainability boards. The rules for being on that board are very loosey-goosey. So you could continue to be on that board. You just wouldn't represent the Longmont Sustainability Committee formally.
I'm going to be the steering committee right now. Ernan and Maria and I are planning on meeting in the next few days. So I'll clarify what the requirements are and how formalized that is. And then see, because I'm not sure, but you may remember and you may be right. I looked at the bylaws a month or so ago, but we don't need to take much more time. I'll get a little more informed and put it before the board. But I also think whether we nominate somebody or not, from the council's perspective, if you're on this board, you're able to participate on that. So even if someone on the board, if there's a new member, Robert, who is not specifically nominated and they're on the board and they, request interest in it, my understanding is they could join that group.
Mary, did you restate your motion?
I move that Daniel Leonard be voted to be the new representative for the Longmont Sustainability Committee to the Regional Sustainability Council for 1 year, fiscal year July 1st. I don't know, 1 year from today.
Sure. Is there a second for that motion?
Second one.
Because I'll second it to yes, I would accept doing that too.
I was going to ask for a
Yeah.
discussion before we voted and make sure that Daniel, you were in fact interested in adding that to your plate. That's a yes.
That would be very exciting and enjoyable. Thank you. And thank you, Mary, for nomination.
Any other discussion necessary here before we take a vote? All those in favor of this motion? Any opposed? All right, looks like that carries. Congrats, Daniel, and thank you for stepping up to help us out.
Robert, I'm glad that you didn't say nay, because I'm a horsey person, and to me, saying nay is always the affirmative vote. So anyway.
Too funny. Ethan, before we went down this lane, you had your hand raised. Do you still have an item to bring?
I'll withdraw that.
Okay. I had one thing. So as we just went through the question and interview process for candidates, we had so many wonderful people interested in supporting the board that we had very limited time with each of them. And I think maybe in a future meeting, we should put on the agenda a few minutes once we get the new people seated to reduce the number of questions that we have or prioritize them and find a way to make sure that we get the most out of the limited time we have available. Because it just felt like maybe we were encouraging them to go quickly, or if they didn't go quickly, we weren't able to get through everything. And I think there may be a way to make sure that we get the full perspective that the board thinks is best to make a good recommendation to city council.
I recommend going forward that the board generate the questions. There were some questions in there that really seemed redundant, and they didn't seem very relevant to the work that we do.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar that they need to be updated.
Yeah.
I had a moment where I was like, wow, it's 2025. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
Heather, I know Heather came on, so I don't if you had some advice to share on that.
Not advice, just a little clarification. I think those questions were originally given to city council when city council was doing those interviews and making that happen. So they have not really been revised since the board has been the ones to do those interviews. So I think that would be a good thing to do for next year.
Yeah,
Or is that direction you need from council to update those questions, or is that something that's within the board's purview here? This is my ignorance here.
that's what I was gonna ask Heather, if when we send the recommended candidates on, can we just share that feedback and ask that question? Because I'm not entirely sure. And then we could also do that pretty easily in one of our upcoming meetings, probably, so it's just done for the next time. But Heather, will you include that in that email? And we can.
Sure can.
Thank
And I
you.
don't know if that is council direction, council member Popkin. I don't know if that's something that you can check with them on. I think that it was something that the city council requested staff and the boards to give questions for those interviews originally. So I'm not sure if we need additional direction for them to maybe revise those or update them or not.
I will make a note to inquire about that. Thank
Thanks.
you. And to the extent, and once I inquire, I like Lisa's suggestion of updating the questions to the extent that we give you that, we confirm that direction while everything's still fresh. Really like that.
I think
Good, Daniel.
in addition to the questions, it would be nice to what Ethan was saying, revisit the process a bit too, in particularly what that rubric looks like, how we use the application versus the interview, is maybe just worth this group having a more serious conversation about the time we want to give to the interviews, how we build and use that rubric. Because I don't think we were all ranking numbers 1 through 5, but I don't think any of us had a conversation about what those numbers meant before we did it. So, yeah, that it might be worth it just for us to revisit process.
That might be
Are there-
I'll just note that might be a process that is consistent and intentionally consistent across the advisory boards. I will also ask about that, and I will be going through all of the interviews in like 2 weeks for all of the different boards. So I'm happy to report back what I learned from that, because this is the first time I'm going through that on the council side of things. I've been interviewed on a board side of things and interviewed others from the Planning and Zoning Commission perspective, but there were also some legal things for planning and zoning that we had to deal with that I don't think SAB had to necessarily deal with. So that could have been a different process. I'll look into it and I'll report back.
Excellent. Are there any other items from the board? Okay. Councilmember Popkin, anything from your seat?
2 items. One, just want to echo Ralph's shout out for the sustainability meeting last week and thank all the staff and board members who attended and supported that in various ways. I'd never been to that facility before, and it was quite a lovely setup there. So I think that was Heather. I think that was your get, right? Well done. And then the other update, I actually wanted to maybe turn this over to Lisa briefly. I believe the shout outs in order, Lisa, for the resilient United Nations Resilient City acknowledgement there. Do you want to share a little bit more with the board about the context for that?
Yeah, sure. That's really exciting. I know Daniel mentioned this earlier. If you all haven't seen, Longmont was just designated as the first UN resilience hub in the United States, which is pretty amazing. So it's part of the Resilient Cities 2030 initiative, and it's a collection of cities that you have to apply to be one of the cities. We were invited to apply based on mostly our flood recovery work after the 2013 flood and the Resilient St. Breen project that was restoring the river corridor, moving folks out of the floodplain, all of that work that has been an incredible partnership across many different departments and entities over a decade of work. That's also built a really collaborative structure for how we approach resilience work in general. And so we were identified as what's considered a stage C city. So we've gone through kind of A and B, and now we're at a place to share that learning with others. So we have joined a network of folks across the globe. We've offered up, as through that application process, a number of different services for cities that are interested in enhancing their resilience. And it also allows us to learn from other cities who have dealt with other issues or are doing other things with regards to resilience. So it's also pretty exciting. Longmont's a pretty small community. A lot of the other cities are quite large cities and have been doing a ton of work. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. You know, a big shout out to the city team and commitment to that. So yeah, thanks.
And Lisa, so it's Longmont's the first designated stage C city, or any city from the
Resilience,
US?
yeah, in general.
And there are 1,840 participant cities in this so far, is that correct?
There's nothing in the US yet until Longmont, yeah. I don't know that there's been a lot of like promotion of it or you know, so I think that there's other parts of the world that focus more on that kind of thing through the UN, but still it's pretty, for us, I think it's pretty exciting, like putting Longmont on the map.
Yeah, even more surprising given that ICLEI, for local governments, is part of this, and Resilient Cities Network is part of this. I mean, those are not small organizations, so intriguing.
Maybe we
And-
need to add signs on 287 as you enter Longmont under we're designated as a
All
tree
Amer-
city. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
All America City, yeah.
Yeah. Put a new sign under that. You and Resilient City.
Great idea.
I think that's it from my end.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Davidson.
Of course. So just a reminder, there were items, info items attached in the packet for your information. So make sure you had a chance to review those. And that's it. We should adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn today?
Before we adjourn, I just
but-
want to say I won't be able to be here at next month's meeting. So I just want to say thanks to Michelle and Ralph and Mary for your time and your commitment on this board. And it's been a pleasure working with you all.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you,
Oh,
Heather.
thanks, Heather. Thanks for all your support
I also
guiding us
wanted
through
to
this.
say, Michelle, your baby is beautiful. And
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Do we need to reopen the public invited to be heard?
I know he's trying to be heard.
For the June meeting, just real quickly, yeah, so Heather noted she'll be gone. Becky Doyle is gonna run the meeting. I'll be in Salt Lake, but it is a virtual meeting, so I should be on, but fingers crossed, I don't have any tech issues. Most of that meeting will be dedicated to having Longmont Power and Communications talking about it's the VPP, right? Susan, I apologize, I don't have the agenda up in front of me.
Yep.
And
DERs are distributed energy resources and the virtual power plant. And thanks for the teaser for next time.
yep, thanks, and an update from Platte River, so. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect.
I'll let you make your motion now.
Yeah. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I move to adjourn.
All right, Ralph,
I will
second.
second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. And that was unanimous. So thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon and a safe Memorial Day weekend.
Everyone, take
Thanks,
care.
y'all.
night.
Aye.